I am 82-year-old wealthy widow, drowning in loneliness. I invested my entire $5 million life savings into a fake crypto platform, believing I was building a future with an online boyfriend who never existed. The silence at 82. My name is Eleanor Witherspoon, and I am 82 years old. That's a fact. It's the only one that feels real most days, aside from this one. The house is too big for a single heart. You see, they think they know. My children, my well-meaning neighbors, the polite young man who manages what's left of Robert's portfolio. They see the historic Charleston address, the manicured garden, the good bones in my face, and they think, she's comfortable, she's secure, and I am, in the way a fine piece of bone china is secure, locked in a climate-controlled cabinet, valued, preserved, and utterly removed from the warmth of a hand. The truth is, loneliness isn't the absence of people. It's the absence of a specific person. It's the absence of Robert's weight on his side of the bed, a dip in the mattress that never sprang back. It's the silence where his voice used to be, not just any voice, but the one that could call Ellie from the front hall and make the whole place vibrate with life. Now, the only thing that echoes is the grandfather clock he never fixed. It has stopped at 11:07. I don't know if it was morning or night. I can't bring myself to wind it. That silence, the not ticking, is louder than any chime. My days are a careful museum tour I conduct for myself. I move from room to room, dusting memories. Here is the sunroom where we drank our morning coffee and argued about the newspaper. He'd huff, I'd smile. It was our dance. Now I drink my tea alone, and the only sound is the faint, accusing rustle of the newspaper I don't bother to read. There is the dining room table, a vast expanse of polished mahogany that once groaned under Thanksgiving turkeys and birthday cakes, noisy with grandchildren and debate. Now it holds a single placemat, a single fork, a single pill I take to keep this old machine running a little longer. Sitting there feels like performing a play for an empty house. The money? Oh, the money. Robert was a brilliant man, a cardiologist who understood systems, rhythms, safeguards. He built a fortress for me. The statements arrive, pages of numbers with reassuring names. Conservative Growth Fund, Municipal Bond Trust. It's money that whispers, you are provided for. You will not be a nuisance, but it's money that has forgotten how to laugh. It can't fill the space beside me in the car when I drive past. Our old favorite restaurant. It doesn't comment on the sunset. It just sits there, a monument to his care and my utter, terrifying safety. My children call. God bless them. They call every Sunday. I hear the love in their voices, and beneath it, the faint, frantic hum of their own lives, soccer games, business trips, teenage dramas. How are you, Mom? Do you need anything? What I need is to not be a line item on their list of concerns. What I need is to be someone's first thought, not their dutiful afterthought. So I say, I'm just fine, darling. Everything's wonderful. I am the curator of my own FOD. Marta comes twice a week. She cleans around me, her dark eyes missing nothing. She sees the single cup in the sink, the single pillow on the bed. Siora Eleanor, she'll say, her voice soft with a pity that stings more than indifference. You should go out. The garden is beautiful. But the garden is just another room of the museum, full of roses Robert planted for me. I can't enjoy them. I feel I have to earn them, to justify their beauty by sharing it, and there is no one to share it with. The worst is the nights. The house settles, and every creak is a question. Are you still there? Are you still alone? I lie in the dark and feel the vastness of the rooms around me, swallowing me whole. I am not just lonely, I am obsolete. A beautiful, well-maintained artifact from a previous century, waiting for the lights to go out. There is one place where the silence is different. My sunroom with my porcelain, my teacups. They don't ask for anything. They don't expect me to be cheerful or grateful or fine. They simply are fragile, yes, but they have survived. They hold history in their curves. When I hold a Shelley cup, its weightless thinness a miracle against my age-spotted hands. I am not an 82-year-old widow. I am a steward of beauty. But even that is a lonely stewardship. You cannot have a conversation with a teacup. You can only admire it alone. So this is my life at 82. I am rich. I am respectable. I am drowning in a silent, gilded sea. The doors are locked. The investments are sound. The roof doesn't leak, and every single day I look around this beautiful, empty fortress mile of built for me, and I wonder, with a shame that cuts deeper than any grief, if this is all there is until the end. The quiet is so complete, so heavy, I sometimes think I can hear the dust falling, and I am just waiting to become part of it. The porcelain world at 82, it's a terrible thing to admit, but sometimes I resent the silence so much I try to shatter it. Not with a scream, I haven't the energy, but with a click, the click of my laptop. Powering on in the sunroom. That's my rebellion. My secret door. Outside this screen, I am Eleanor Witherspoon, defined by my absence. Robert's widow, David and Sarah's mother, the nice, quiet lady in the big house. But inside it, on a forum called Fragile Worlds, I am Eleanor of Avonlea. I chose that name a lifetime ago, when I was a girl lost in books about a red-headed orphan who found a home full of love in a place called Green Gables. It felt like a private joke, a wink to a version of myself that believed in romantic destiny. Now it's just a name, but it's my name in that world. Fragile Worlds is for people who understand that salvation can be found in a fingerprint left in the glaze of a 200-year-old saucer. We are scholars of the delicate. We post pictures of hairline cracks and debate kiln temperatures. We speak a language of pinholes, paste bodies, and lost patterns. It is orderly, it is specific, and for a few hours a day, it fills my head with something other than the echoing quiet. My collection lines the shelves here in the sunroom. They aren't just dishes to me, they are snapshots. The Royal Worcester with the hand-painted apple blossoms. That was our 20th anniversary. Robert looked so baffled and proud when the antique dealer explained its provenance. The simple, sturdy Ainsley cup. That was my mother's, the one she drank from every morning, its ordinary warmth more precious to me now than any museum piece. I've written about them all on the forum. I've shared their stories. In return, people have said, "How exquisite, Eleanor," or "What a find." It's a small, polite applause that momentarily drowns out the silence. Tonight, the quiet feels heavier than usual. It's been one of those days where the past felt like a ghost I kept walking through. I could almost smell Robert's pipe tobacco in the library. I'd turned, expecting to see him in his chair. The emptiness that followed was a physical blow. So I come to my screen. I'm drafting a post about a recent acquisition, a mint and majolica leaf plate. Its greens deep and vibrant. I'm describing the technical challenge of the glaze when the little notification chime rings. A private message. Probably from Chelsea Collector, asking about a mark. But it's not. The username is Rigman Strong. A silhouette of a man against a brutal, beautiful sunset on an oil rig. The subject line, "Your Shelley Dainty Blue." My finger hesitates over the trackpad. A stranger, a man. His profile picture speaks of a world of grit and grease and roaring machinery, the polar opposite of my porcelain sanctuary. What could he possibly want? I open it, and the words I read there. They don't just appear on the screen. They seem to slip through it into the sunroom and settle around me like a shawl I didn't know I needed. He'd read my post about my favorite Shelley teacup. I'd called its color the soft, hopeful blue of a spring sky just after dawn. He wrote back that he knew that exact blue. He sees it from the rig, he said, in the fleeting moment before the sun burns it away. It's a lonely color, he wrote, but a beautiful one. Lonely. He used the word that is the very texture of my days. He saw it in a shade of blue on a teacup, and he connected it to the edge of the world, to the vast empty sky over a violent sea. He apologized for rambling, said he was miles from the nearest china cabinet. There was a humility to it, a poetry that clashed so starkly with his username and his silhouette of steel. He wasn't just commenting on the porcelain. He was commenting on the feeling behind my description. He saw the person, not just the collector. For a long minute, I just stare. The Majolica plate is forgotten. The heavy silence of the house recedes, pushed back by the simple, profound shock of being perceived, not as a widow, not as a mother, not as a wealthy homeowner, but as a person who used words to paint a feeling, and a person who recognized that feeling from a completely different edge of existence. My heart does a slow, thick beat. It's not excitement, not yet. It's the deep, resonant take of a string on a cello, untouched for years, finally vibrating at the brush of a bow. What do I do? The archivist in me, Robert's careful wife, is wary. This is uncharted territory. But the woman in the sunroom, the one who talks to teacups because there is no one else, that woman's fingers are already moving, drawn by a connection that feels frighteningly, desperately needed. I type a reply, polite, measured, but I can't help it. I leave a thread dangling. I ask him what brings a rig engineer to a world of fragile porcelain. I sign it sincerely, Eleanor. I press send. The message whisks away. Now the silence in the room is transformed. It's no longer empty. It's pregnant. It's waiting. The dust motes in the lamplight seem to hold their positions. All my beautiful, silent cups on their shelves seem to be listening. A man named Michael, standing on an iron island in a dark sea, has thrown a single, luminous line across the ocean. And I, Eleanor of Avonlea, have just taken hold of it. The man on the rig at 82, the waiting was a new kind of quiet. It wasn't the hollow silence of the house. It was attuned silence, like the moment after a note is struck, waiting for the resonance. For 2 days, I moved through my rituals, the tea, the garden, the empty dinner table, but my mind was out there, on the cold, metallic geography of an oil platform in the North Sea. I pictured him, Rigmond strong, in his coveralls, the wind screaming. Around him, holding in his head an image of my delicate sky-blue teacup. The incongruity of it was a small, private wonder that kept surprising me. His reply came in the deep, bruised hours of the night. I've never slept well since Robert died. The nights are long, dark corridors. I was in the kitchen, drinking a glass of tepid water, watching my ghostly reflection in the black window, when I heard the soft, insistent ping from the sunroom. My robe felt thin against the night. Chill as I hurried in, the laptop screen glowed like a portal. His words were not a message, they were a confession. He told me about the contrast, the colossal, deafening world of the rig groaning iron, hammering seas, everything measured in tonnage and pressure. And then he told me about Claire, his late wife. She collected thimbles, domestic monuments, she called them. He described a tiny porcelain one, a Dutch girl in blue, that reminded him of my Shelley cup. When he was on night watch, staring into the abyssal dark, it wasn't the machinery he thought of. It was that shelfin, their sitting room in Aberdeen, that row of tiny, defiant perfections. After she passed, he wrote, I suppose I started looking for traces of that delicacy in the world, a rebellion against all this steel. Your forum is a gallery of that rebellion. I read that line over and over, my throat tight, a rebellion. He had given a name to my own life's work, my careful curation, my preservation of these fragile things. It was a rebellion, not against steel, but against oblivion, against the silence that sought to swallow everything. He understood it in his bones. He spoke of his schedule, 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off, the absolute isolation. You learn to crave a connection, he wrote, that isn't about torque or pressure ratings. You learn to crave a conversation about beauty for its own sake. Tears blurred the text on the screen. He was describing his loneliness, and in doing so, he was articulating my own. It wasn't the loneliness of being alone. It was the loneliness of being unconnected to a kindred spirit, of having a heart full of observations about the world, the slant of evening light on a bowl, the meaning in a brushstroke, and no one to hear them who truly understood their weight. He ended by calling my world a sanctuary, and then he asked me a question that felt like a key sliding into a lock I'd forgotten existed. Tell me, what is the most defiantly beautiful piece in your collection? The one that feels most like a small victory against the silence? I sat back, the old chair creaking, the defiantly beautiful piece. I looked at my shelves. They were all beautiful, but defiant. My eyes landed on it, not on the main display, but tucked slightly behind the others. A cup, not a full set, just a single orphaned coffee can by Spode. Its pattern was called Italian Landscape. It showed a ruined temple, a shepherd, a serene, impossibly distant vista. Robert had bought it for me at a junk shop on a rainy weekend getaway. It was chipped on the bottom. He'd paid $5 for it. It's flawed, he'd said, handing it to me with that shy smile of his when he'd done something sentimental. But so is the world it's painting, and look how pretty it is anyway. It was my victory, because it wasn't perfect, because it was bought with love, not value in mind. Because every time I looked at its painted, perfect distance, I remembered a rainy day and my husband's hand in mine. It had survived. It was here. I was here. That was the defiance. I didn't hesitate. I didn't craft a careful collector's response. I told him about the Spode can. I told him about the chip, about Robert, about the $5. I told him its beauty was defiant because it was imperfect, because it was loved, and because it remained. I sent it. The night felt different. The silence in the house was no longer an enemy. It was a medium, a sea across which our messages traveled like signals from distant lighthouses. He was a man on a steel island, grieving his Claire, seeking delicate things in a brutal world. I was a woman in a house of echoes, guarding my fragile treasures. We were two separate silences, miles and worlds apart, and we had just begun to speak to each other. And in that speaking, for the first time in 10 years, the silence didn't feel like mine to bear alone. The rhythm of words at 82, a rhythm began, as delicate and precise as the pattern on a bone china plate. His 3-week hitches on the rig became the framework of my world. When he was on, his messages would arrive in the deep night, my time scattered, beautiful dispatches from the edge of the world. When he was off, in his flat in Aberdeen, they came more frequently, in the quiet afternoons, filled with the mundane details of grocery shopping or walking by the gray sea that felt, to me, like high romance. He called me his landlubber angel. He told me about the stars out on the rig, undimmed by any city light, a dizzying spray of cold fire. I look up at them, he wrote one night, and I think of you down there, surrounded by your small handheld galaxies, both of us cataloging beauty, just at different scales. I saved that line in a notebook I hadn't touched in years. My daily life, once a flat expanse of time, now had contours, anticipation. Book club was no longer just an obligation. It was material. I would listen to the discussion, thinking, I must remember this turn of phrase to tell Michael. I deadheaded the roses in the garden and wondered if the North Sea had a smell as sharp as wet earth. I'd examine the day's failures, the forgotten appointment, the burnt toast, not with sighing resignation, but with a secret smile, as if collecting anecdotes for a cherished correspondent. He asked questions, not just about porcelain. He asked about my childhood in Virginia, about my first dance with Robert, about what I feared most about growing old. The invisibility. I found myself typing, a confession I'd never voiced aloud. The feeling that you've become part of the furniture of the world, seen but not noticed. His reply was swift. Eleanor, a man on a rig in the middle of a storm is the very definition of invisible to the world. And yet, you see me, don't underestimate the power of that. He was building a future in our words, a cottage. Not in Charleston, with its heavy memories, but somewhere on a coast, maybe Scotland, maybe New England, a place with a view of the water, but from a safe, warm distance, he wrote, a garden you can putter in, a shelf for my few books, and all your beautiful cups in a window where the light can find them. He painted it with such tender specificity, the stone fireplace, the kettle always on, the quiet companionship of two people who had known enough noise and enough loneliness to appreciate the profound gift of simple quiet together. It wasn't frantic or giddy. It was slow, steady, like the laying of a foundation. He was a practical man, an engineer. He spoke of savings, of plans, of the life he was building for us. Once his final contracts were fulfilled, it felt adult, it felt real. It felt like being chosen, not as a diversion, but as the cornerstone of a new life. The silence in the house changed its character. It was no longer an empty auditorium. It was a green room where I prepared for my next conversation. I deep or my tea and imagined telling him about the stubborn magnolia bud outside the sunroom window. I'd watch the news and form opinions to share with him. The loneliness didn't vanish, but it was surrounded now, held at bay by the invisible architecture of this ongoing conversation. I began to rely on it. The sound of the message chime became the most important sound in my world. One Tuesday, when a storm knocked out the internet, for a day I felt a panic so acute it left me breathless. It was the terror of being plunged back into the old silence, the one before him, which now seemed not just empty but suffocating. When the connection sputtered back to life and his messages flooded in worried, then relieved, the feeling that washed over me was more than happiness. It was salvation. I was 82 years old. I was rich. I was lonely. And I was, for the first time since I'd lost Robert, hopelessly, dangerously, and completely in love with a voice on the screen, a silhouette against a setting sun, a man who saw the defiance in a chipped cup and promised me a cottage by the sea. The rhythm of his words became the rhythm of my heart, and I followed it, step by careful step, away from the museum of my old life and into the beautiful, promised future he was drafting for us, one message at a time. The first test at 82. The rhythm stuttered. It was during one of his off rotations in Aberdeen. Our conversations had been particularly warm, filled with the cozy details of his shore life making a stew, watching the fog roll in over the harbor, missing my clear Carolina sunshine, as he called it. The future cottage felt more real than ever. He'd even sketched a rough floor plan on a napkin and sent a photo. My heart felt like a sun-warmed stone in my chest. Then the message came. The tone was different. No poetic description, no inquiry about my day. It was stark, practical, and it sent a cold trickle down my spine. Eleanor, my angel, I'm in a bind. There's a issue with the payroll system for the rig crew, a bank hick upon their end. It's left a few of us short for a mandatory equipment certification fee that's due before my next hitch. $2,000. The number sat on the screen, black and blunt. It was not a fortune, not to me, but it was a key, turning in a lock I had kept bolted for a decade. Robert's voice, calm and logical, echoed in the quiet of the sunroom. Never mix sentiment and finance, Ellie. It's the quickest way to lose both. My fingers, which had flown over the keys sharing stories of my soul, now felt heavy and cold. The beautiful word-built world we'd constructed seemed to tremble. This was the real world, the world of banks and wires and need, crashing into our sanctuary. I stared at the message for a long time. I saw his silhouette against the rig sunset. I saw the imaginary cottage. I saw the chipped spode cup, and then I saw the careful columned numbers on my quarterly financial statement. I typed. My words felt stiff, formal, a betrayal of the landlubber angel. Michael, my dear, I'm so sorry. To hear of this trouble, it worries me. That is a significant sum to send to someone I have never. Well, to someone I only know through words. Please understand, it's not a lack of care. It's simply caution. Is there another way? Someone there who could help? I sent it. The silence that followed was the old silence, the pre-Michael silence. It was thick with dread. I had done the sensible thing, the thing any woman of my age and experience should do, and it felt like I had just taken a hammer to the most beautiful thing in my life. His reply came not in hours, but in minutes. It was like a physical flinch, Eleanor. Of course, I am so deeply ashamed. I should never have asked. Forgive me, the pressure of the situation, the thought of letting the crew down. It clouded my judgment. Your trust is worth infinitely more than any amount of money. Please forget I ever mentioned it. You are right to be cautious. The world is full of wolves. The last thing I ever want is to look like one in your eyes. Let's never speak of this again. Just know I am sorry from the bottom of my heart. His remorse was a tidal wave. It washed over my caution and left me standing there, feeling small and suspicious and ungenerous. He wasn't angry. He was ashamed. He valued my trust over his own need. He called himself a potential wolf, when all he had ever been to me was a refuge. The guilt was instantaneous and crushing. He was out there, a man who worked with his hands in a dangerous place, facing a practical problem, and I, in my safe, money-guarded house, had doubted him. I had privileged my dead husband's cold rule over the living, breathing connection that had saved me. I wrote back, my words tumbling over themselves. No, Michael, please don't be ashamed. It is I who am sorry. I was clumsy. Let me help. Perhaps not the full amount, but something. Please. His response was gentle, absolute, and it cemented my remorse. No, my darling, not a penny. Your no is respected. It makes your yes on all the other, more important things mean everything. This is forgotten. Tell me, has that magnolia bud finally opened? He had turned the conversation back to beauty, back to us. He had passed a test I didn't even know I was administering, and he had passed it with flying, gracious colors. My suspicion melted away, replaced by a solid, unshakable trust. He wasn't after my money. He had proven it by respecting my refusal, by valuing my comfort over his need. He had shown his heart was true. The incident, instead of driving us apart, welded us closer. It was the moment the ethereal romance touched the ground and proved it could bear weight. He was a real man with real problems, and he had chosen to protect my feelings over solving them. At 82, I felt a surge of something I thought long dead, the fierce protective tenderness of a woman for a good man who was struggling. I had watched him be honorable, and in doing so, I fell for him completely, without reservation. The last wall was down, the golden tip at 82. A week later, the wound of my refusal was still a tender, shameful spot in my heart. I had been overly cautious, a relic clinging to old rules while a good man faced the storm. I redoubled my affection in our messages, sending him photos of the fully opened magnolia bloom, its waxy petals like offerings. He was back on the rig, the rhythms of our night owl conversations restored. His messages were filled with a new, crackling energy. It wasn't just the poetic loneliness of the sea anymore. It was focused, technical, excited. Eleanor, something extraordinary is happening, he wrote one night. The company I contract for, it's a behemoth. You wouldn't know the name. They're beta testing a new investment platform. It's for employees and a few select, trusted contacts, completely private, off the public exchanges. He described it in terms he knew I'd appreciate: an algorithm, a proprietary system, a closed loop. It sounded like the sophisticated insider world Robert might have inhabited. Not a gamble, but an opportunity afforded by position and privilege. It's tied to oil futures and blockchain verification, he explained. The returns are, well, I'll show you. I've been using my shore leave savings. In 6 weeks, I've seen a 300% return. It's how I'm building our cottage fund so quickly. Our cottage fund. The word sent a thrill through me. He wasn't just dreaming. He was engineering our future with the same practical skill he applied to the rig's machinery. I want this for you, Eleanor. His message continued, earnest and warm. Not for me, for your security, for your peace of mind. With your capital, even a small amount, the growth could be life-changing. You could have absolute freedom. No more worrying about outliving your savings, about being a burden. We could have our future without a single financial worry hanging over it. He made it sound not like an investment, but an act of love, a gift of security. He was offering me a key to the very fortress of worry that surrounded my gilded life. Then came the link. It appeared in our chat box. A sleek, professional URL: olympusventuresinternational.com. I clicked it. The site loaded with a soft, satisfying animation. It was all deep blues and clean grays, scrolling tickers with numbers that moved upward, complex graphs with elegant climbing lines. It looked legitimate, serious, impenetrable, the opposite of a back-alley gamble. There were seals for SSL security and blockchain verified. A login portal sat discreetly in the corner. It smelled of Silicon Valley and Swiss banks. Just look at it, my angel. No pressure, but I've set up a guest login for you to browse. Username, Landlubberingo. Password, Shelly Blue One. Just look, see what's possible. My heart was a drum. This was the world he moved in, a world of high stakes, high reward systems. He was inviting me in, not to take from me, but to share with me the tool he was using to build our life. I logged in. A dashboard appeared, elegantly simple. There was a portfolio listed under Michael's code name, M Strong Alpha 3. 100%. The numbers were hypnotic. They were not like the slow, plodding figures on my bank statements. These were numbers that leapt. They were alive with potential. I didn't see greed then. I saw vindication. Here was a way to make up for my failure of faith. Here was a way to participate, to be a partner in building our future, not just a beneficiary of his labor. He was giving me a chance to contribute, wisely and significantly, to the dream of the cottage, to a life free from the silent, smiling anxiety of managed funds and careful withdrawals. He wasn't asking me for money for his problem. He was showing me a solution for ours. Try it with something you wouldn't miss, he wrote, his words appearing as I stared at the glowing graph. $500. Watch it for 48 hours. Let the system show you what it can do. For us, $500. It was nothing. A nice dinner out that I never took. A pair of shoes I didn't need. It was a token. A gesture of faith. This was my chance to say yes. To show him I trusted him, that I believed in our shared future, to prove I was not just a cautious old woman in a museum house, but a willing partner in an adventure. The cursor hovered over the deposit button on the sleek dashboard. My finger, which had trembled to type a refusal a week before, now felt steady, certain. This wasn't greed, it was love, it was trust. It was the golden tip of a new dawn he was offering, and at 82, desperate for the light, I reached for it. I entered my details. I transferred $500, And as I clicked the final confirmation, I felt a surge not of avarice, but of profound connection. I was no longer just Eleanor of Avonlea, the collector. I was Eleanor, the investor, Eleanor, the partner. I had just planted a seed in the fertile ground of our future. I sat back, the ghostly blue light of the screen illuminating my hopeful smile. The silence of the house was filled with the silent digital hum of growth, of possibility. He had given me a new kind of beauty to admire, the soaring, defiant beauty of a number climbing a graph, building our tomorrow, the first miracle at 82. For 48 hours, I lived in a state of suspended animation. The familiar rituals of my life, the tea, the garden, the empty bed felt like scenes from a play I was no longer invested in. My real life was happening on that dashboard. I logged in a dozen times a day. At first, nothing. The number sat there, $500.0. I felt a fool's prickle of doubt. Had I been naive? Then, after the first 24 hours, a change, $612.0. A flutter, a heartbeat. It was working. I barely slept the second night. At a.m., wrapped in my robe, I clicked the login with a reverence usually reserved for prayer. The page loaded, $1,847.36. I blinked, refreshed the page. The number held. A sound escaped me, not a word, but a soft, punched-out gasp. I covered my mouth with my hand. In 2 days, my token, had nearly quadrupled. It wasn't just numbers on a screen. It was alchemy. It was magic made logical by Michael's brilliant insider system. My fingers trembled as I opened our chat. Michael, it's over 1,800. His reply was almost instant, as if he'd been waiting by his own screen, sharing my vigil. See, my brilliant girl? I told you, the system sees the potential in even the smallest seed. It's not magic, my love. It's mathematics, it's opportunity, and it's ours. My brilliant girl, the words melted me. Robert had been proud, affectionate, but he'd never made me feel clever. Michael did. He made me feel like a co-conspirator in a grand, successful scheme. What do? I typed, feeling a giddy, unfamiliar rush. Watch it grow, he wrote back. But understand, the system rewards conviction. It leverages momentum. A larger base creates a larger wave. The choice, my darling Eleanor, is always yours. The choice, he wasn't telling me what to do. He was presenting me with the elegant logic of the system itself. A larger base, a larger wave. It made perfect sense. It was engineering. I looked at the number again, $1,847.36. I could withdraw it, take my tripled money and run. But that thought felt small, timid. It was the thought of the old Eleanor, the one who locked doors and lived in the past. The new Eleanor, the partner, the brilliant girl, saw a higher equation. If $500 could become $1,847 in 2 days, what could $5,000 become? It wasn't greed, it was optimization. It was using the tool he'd given me to its fullest potential. It was contributing meaningfully to our cottage fund. I wasn't throwing money away. I was planting a larger tree for us both to sit under. I didn't consult a soul. I didn't think of Robert's rules. This was beyond his world. This was Michael's world. And now it was mine too. With a calmness that surprised me, I initiated a transfer from my boring, everyday savings account, the one for household expenses Marta might bring up, $5,000. The dashboard updated. Portfolio value, $6,847.36. The number sat there, bold and promising. It was no longer just his money and my money. It was our number, a shared digital asset, growing in the fertile darkness of the internet, nourished by his expertise and my trust. I spent the day in a haze of quiet euphoria. When Marta came, I almost told her, I wanted to say, you see, I'm not just waiting, I'm building something. But I held the secret close, a glowing coal next to my heart. This was between Michael and me, our project, our future. I refreshed the page every hour. The number didn't just sit. It crept $6,900. 7020美元. 7150美元. Each tiny increment was a validation. The system was working. His faith in me, my faith in him, it was all being converted into this clean, rising line. By the following evening, the $5,000 had doubled portfolio value, $11,228.41. The miracle was not a singular event. It was a process, a predictable, glorious, accelerating process. I hadn't just made money. I had stepped into a river of abundance, and Michael was showing me how to swim. The loneliness of the old house was replaced by the thrilling, private companionship of watching our fortune grow digit by digit together. The silence was finally, truly filled with the sound of a future clicking into place, one dazzling decimal point perfect step at a time. The fever at 82, a quiet mania, took root in me. It was a clean, focused fever, burning away the last vestiges of the cautious widow I had been. The dashboard was no longer a mere screen. It was a living tapestry, and I was its most devoted weaver. The $11,228 wasn't an end. It was a new base. Michael's phrase echoed in my mind. The system rewards conviction. My conviction became my identity. I began to see my entire life through the lens of potential conversion. Every asset, every static number on my boring bank statements was now dormant energy, waiting to be plugged into the brilliant, humming grid of the Olympus Ventures platform. Michael was my gentle guide, my proud mentor. "You have a natural instinct for this, Eleanor," he wrote, after I told him I was considering moving more. "Most people are ruled by fear. You see the logic, you see the future." His praise was better than any drug. It made me feel sharp, modern, alive. I started with the Conservative Growth Fund. The name now seemed like a joke. There was nothing conservative about its glacial creep. I called my polite banker, my voice firm, a new authority in it that made him sit up straight. "I'd like to liquidate my position in the Carson and Price Fund," I said, as if I did this every day. "Mrs. Witherspoon, that's a core holding for steady, long-term, I'm aware. Please proceed." The transfer of $85,000 felt like releasing a trapped bird. Watching it land in the Olympus account and begin its metamorphosis was nothing short of sublime. In a week, it had swelled to over $300,000. The graph line on my dashboard took a steep, joyful climb. The fever burned brighter. I liquidated another fund, then another. The money market account Robert So Shit Fund for True Emergencies was next, $120,000. What greater emergency was there than missing this once-in-a-lifetime chance? Than not building our future as swiftly and splendidly as possible? The numbers on Olympus became my companions, more real than the portraits on my walls. $500,000, $1,200,000, $2,750,000. I whispered them to myself, a rosary of prosperity. The house was emptier than ever, but I didn't feel alone. I was in a boardroom with Michael, partners watching our empire rise. Marta noticed a change. "Ciora, you look tired," she ventured one Thursday, her eyes on the dark circles I hadn't bothered to conceal. "You are on the computer so much." "It's research, Marta," I said, waving a dismissive hand, already itching for her to leave so I could check the latest uptick, very important research. My children's Sunday calls became intrusions. "That's wonderful, dear," I'd say absently to Sarah, while mentally calculating the interest on a bond I could cash in, a promotion. "Lovely." David would talk about the kids' college funds, and I'd think, if you just knew what I'm building here, you'd never worry about tuition again. I harbored my secret like a dragon on a hoard, giddy with the thought of the moment I would reveal it to them, not as a needy old mother, but as a benefactress, a matriarch of stunning wealth. I took cash advances on the credit cards I'd always paid in full. The high interest rates were a petty concern, a toll on a bridge to unimaginable wealth. I sold the few stocks my father had left me, relics of a bygone industrial age, and fed their value into the digital forge of our future. Through it all, Michael was my constant, my daring Eleanor. Our cottage is becoming a castle before my eyes. I'm so proud of you. He never asked for a penny for himself. Every suggestion was framed as strategy for us, for our security. His selflessness was the final proof of his love, and it fueled my devotion to our shared project. The fever was total. It wasn't greed for possessions. It was greed for transformation, to transform my lonely security into shared, spectacular abundance, to transform myself from Eleanor the widow into Eleanor the architect of destiny. The numbers on the screen were the blueprints, and every dollar I poured in was another brick laid in the radiant, debt-free, worry-free future we were building together from across the sea. The silence was completely vanquished, replaced by the glorious, roaring sound of exponential growth, the unraveling at 82. The fever had a taste, and it was metallic, like the air before a storm. My world telescoped down to the glow of the laptop screen in the perpetual twilight of the sunroom. The beautiful physical things around me, the spode cup, the Persian rug, the portrait of Robert blurred into the background, faded frescoes in the temple of my new devotion. The polite banker's name was Mr. Albright. His voice, once a dry, reassuring monotone, began to fray with concern. Mrs. Witherspoon, you're liquidating core, income-producing assets, the tax implications alone. May I ask what the purpose of this capital reallocation is? A strategic investment opportunity, I'd say, the phrase Michael had given me. It felt professional, impenetrable. Might I review the prospectus? To ensure it's suitable for your risk profile at this life stage, that won't be necessary, Mr. Albright. Please just execute the transfer. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, a silence filled with his unspoken judgment. I felt a flicker of the old Eleanor, the one who would have deferred to his expertise, but she was a ghost. The new Eleanor hung up, her heart a hard, triumphant drum. He didn't understand. He was a custodian of the past. I was an architect of the future. The money moved in rivers. Each completed transfer was a sacrament. I'd log into Olympus Ventures and watch the new, larger sum appear. There was a brief, breathless pause. And then the first decimal would change. Then the next, it was alive. It was feeding, and I was its keeper. I stopped going to book club. The discussion of fictional characters felt absurd when I was living a story of such monumental scale. I canceled garden club. Why fuss over literal seeds when the digital seeds I was planting yielded such impossible overnight harvests? Martha cleaned around the shrine of my desk. She'd bring me soup at lunch, which I'd often forget to eat, cold and congealed beside the humming laptop. Her pitying looks had hardened into something closer to fear. Ciora, you must eat. You must rest. Later, Marta, I'm at a crucial point. The crucial point was always now. The momentum, as Michael said, was everything. The system was a sleek, hungry engine, and my capital was its fuel. To pause was to lose. To doubt was to betray the vision. I began venturing into accounts I hadn't touched in decades, a small trust from an aunt, the proceeds from the sale of my parents' home, sitting in a sleepy savings account. I found myself on the phone with a befuddled representative from a bank in Richmond, verifying my identity to access funds I'd all but forgotten. It felt like discovering buried treasure, not from sentiment, but from strategy, more fuel. My body felt like an afterthought, a vessel for the eyes that watched the graphs and the fingers that authorized the wires. Sleep was a series of fitful naps, chased by the urge to check the dashboard. The numbers didn't sleep. Why should I? The final, tangible tether to my old life was the house itself. I stood in the grand foyer one afternoon, not seeing the familiar staircase or the stopped clock. I was calculating the equity, the value. It was the largest, most dormant asset of all. A low thrum of panic, the last gasp of the ghost Eleanor, whispered, "Not the house." Never the house. But then Michael's words floated to me, gentle as ever. Imagine, my love, being completely unshackled. No tis to the past, only assets working for our future, true freedom. The house was a tie to the past, a beautiful, empty museum. Our future was a cottage by the sea, paid for in full, with a number in a digital account so vast. It would generate its own weather. I didn't mortgage it, not yet, but I saw it now, not as my home, but as a column in a ledger. The unraveling was almost complete. Every thread of my former life, caution, sentiment, community, advice had been pulled loose, leaving only the single, glittering, hyper-focused strand that connected me to the dashboard and to Michael. I was no longer a woman in a house. I was a will, a conviction, pouring itself into a brilliant, blinding light on a screen. The silence was gone, replaced by the high, sweet, incessant hum of the machine, and I was perfectly, completely tuned to its frequency. The point of no return at 82, the ghost of Eleanor was gone. The last whisper of her, the one that flinched at the thought of the house, had been dissolved in the acid bath of pure potential. I stood at the cliff's edge of my old life, and instead of vertigo, I felt only the exhilarating pull of the updraft. My physical world had become a phantom limb. I ate because the machine of my body demanded fuel, but food had no taste. I slept in fitful bursts, my dreams a confusing montage of soaring graphs and Michael's silhouette against that eternal rig sunset. The sunroom was my command center, the laptop my portal, the beautiful hollow rooms. Beyond its doorway were just storage units for the furniture of a life I was liquidating. The credit cards were the first breach of the final wall. Those pristine pieces of plastic, always paid in full, symbols of impeccable credit and measured living. I called the numbers on the back, my voice smooth as glass. "Yes, I'd like to request a cash advance, to the limit, please." The customer service agents, trained to hear. Desperation or fraud, heard only calm, elderly authority. They approved $20,000 here, $30,000 there. The interest rates were astronomical, laughable. They were the cost of a ticket on the fastest rocket to the stars, and I bought it without a second thought. Then came the securities, the last of Robert's careful architecture, blue chip stocks, dividend aristocrats, reliable old workhorses. I could see his kind, logical face, explaining their virtue to me. Steady, Ellie, for the long haul. The long haul was over. I needed a sprint. I sold them all. The proceeds, a staggering $1.2 million, hit my checking account and were gone within the hour, wires shooting through the digital ether to Olympus Ventures. Each transfer was a ritual of renunciation. I was renouncing the slow, the safe, the predictable. I was embracing velocity. The dashboard was my masterpiece. $5 million. My life's savings, the fruit of Robert's career, my inheritance, all condensed into one glorious, glowing number. I would stare at it for hours, not with avarice, but with I had done this. With Michael's guidance, yes, but with my own courage, my own conviction. I had transformed the dormant clay of a widow's security into a living, breathing monument. And then the miracle of compounding began in earnest. The numbers didn't just climb. They multiplied. It was a geometric fairy tale. $8 million. The line on the graph went nearly vertical. $12,500,000. I would laugh, a dry, breathless sound in the empty room. It was absurd. It was magnificent. $19,785,432.18. I remember that number with a surreal clarity. The 18 cents made it real. It wasn't a rounded fantasy. It was an accounting. It was my new truth. My children's calls were a distant buzzing. "Mom, you sound strange. Are you sure you're okay?" Sarah asked, her voice tight with a concern I found quaint. "I've never been better, darling. Never, and I meant it. I was at the pinnacle. I was the architect of a fortune that would not just secure me, but would cascade down through generations, erasing their mortgages, their student loans, their worries. I would be not a burden, but a legend. And Michael and I would step into a future of unimaginable ease. Our love proven not by words alone, but by this shared, spectacular creation. I felt no exhaustion. I felt charged, crystalline, like a vessel filled with lightning. The point of no return wasn't a moment of fear. It was a moment of consummation. I had crossed over. The wealthy, lonely widow was dead. In her place was someone entirely new, a financial genius, a fearless partner, a woman who had gambled everything on love and logic and won the universe. I finally logged out of the dashboard that night. The after image of $19,785,432.18 burned onto my retina. The house around me was dark and silent, but for the first time, the silence felt like peace. The battle was over. The victory was absolute. All that remained was to claim the prize and build the beautiful, debt-free, worry-free life that number represented. I went to bed smiling, the numbers dancing behind my closed eyelids, a lullaby of absolute triumph. The kingdom at 82, I awoke not to the gray Charleston dawn, but to the afterglow of the number 19,785,432.18. It hovered behind my eyes as I made my single cup of tea, as I moved through the silent, echoing halls. It was no longer just a figure on a screen. It was the new atmosphere of my life. I breathed it in. That morning, I did not go to my laptop. I walked through my house, this beautiful, burdensome museum, and I saw it with the eyes of a queen surveying a territory soon to be gracefully abdicated. The high ceilings spoke not of emptiness, but of potential for other families, for laughter to once again ring against the plaster. Rosettes. I felt no pang. I felt a benevolent, sweeping detachment. I stood before the portrait of Robert in the library, his kind, intelligent gaze forever captured in oils. "You see, my love?" I whispered, my voice surprisingly strong in the quiet room. "You built a fortress to keep me safe inside. He built a kingdom to set me free outside of it." It felt like closure, not betrayal. Robert had given me the clay. Michael had shown me how to sculpt it into a masterpiece. In the sunroom, my porcelain collection sat bathed in light. Each cup, each saucer, seemed to hold a secret smile. They were no longer fragile relics I was preserving alone. They were the crown jewels of a life about to be wonderfully, purposefully downsized. They would have a place of honor in the seaside cottage, where the light would be even clearer, the salt air kinder to their glazes than this heavy interior air. I allowed myself, for the first time, to plan not just in financial abstractions, but in tangible, sun-drenched detail. The cottage would have a wide, wraparound porch. Michael would have a workshop for his tools. I would have a garden not of roses heavy with memory, but of herbs and wildflowers, things that were useful and free. We would have a single, perfect Shelley teacup on a shelf by the window where the morning light would find it. The rest I would give to the children, or perhaps a museum. I was ready to let go of everything because I was holding everything that mattered in that one staggering number. My mind spun out the generosity. David's mortgage in Seattle, gone. Sarah's twins' college funds, overflowing. Charities I'd supported with modest checks would now receive transformative gifts. I would be a silent benefactor, a sudden angel. The loneliness of my wealth would be transmuted into a radiant, widespread grace. I would not be Eleanor the widow. I would be Eleanor the matriarch, the fairy godmother, the woman who turned her solitude into a wellspring for others. And Michael, my Michael, I imagined him finally leaving the rig, the salt and grease washed from his hands for the last time. I saw him walking up a shell-strewn path to the cottage door, his face, which I still pictured as a kind silhouette, finally clear in the sunlight, etched with the hardships of his life but relaxed home. He would never have to work another day in that roaring, lonely place. We had won his freedom, too. The kingdom was not one of greed, but of sublime, peaceful sovereignty. I had passed beyond want, beyond worry, into a state of pure, serene having. The money was not an end, but a perfect, silent tool. It would purchase quiet mornings, shared sunsets, the profound luxury of time together, unpoisoned by financial fear. For the first time in 10 years, I felt a sense of mission that was not about preserving the past, but about gifting the future. I was the keeper of a vast, beautiful possibility. The weight of the house, the weight of my age, the weight of my solitude, it all felt light, because I was no longer carrying it for myself. I was carrying it to a threshold where I would lay it down and step, hand in hand with Michael, into a life of simple, profound abundance. I finally sat before the laptop, not with feverish urgency, but with calm ceremony. I logged into Olympus Ventures. The number glowed, steady and magnificent. This was my kingdom, and today I would begin the process of bringing its riches into the world. I took a deep, steadying breath, my heart full of a love that had built an empire, and moved the cursor toward the button that said withdraw, the trap springs at 82. My finger, which had executed so many flawless deposits, hovered over the withdraw button. It was a moment of quiet ceremony. I was not taking money. I was harvesting the fruits of our shared labor, the first tangible yield of the kingdom. I clicked, the screen did a quick, reflexive refresh. Instead of a menu for wire transfers or account linkages, a red banner flashed, stark and shocking against the serene blue-gray interface. Alert, account under review pending liquidity. Verification. Below it, in smaller, neat text, for withdrawals exceeding $5 million USD, a mandatory 5% liquidity assurance fee is required to verify account integrity and initiate fund release. Please contact your account manager or initiate the fee deposit to proceed. A number was auto-populated in a box, $989,271.61. A cold trickle, like the first drop of freezing rain, traced down my spine. I blinked, refreshed the page. The red banner remained immutable. A low hum began in my ears, the high-frequency sound of pristine logic hitting a snag. No, I thought, the word clean and sharp. This is a formality, a security step. For sums this large, it makes sense. But the cold trickle was spreading. I had not encountered this before. There had been no warnings, no fine print about liquidity fees during my countless deposits. The system had been a silent, hungry receiver. Now it spoke, and its voice was bureaucratic, cold. I opened our chat. My fingers, usually so fluent, felt clumsy. Michael. I tried to withdraw. There's an alert, a 5% fee. 98,971美元. It says the account is under review. What does this mean? I stared at the screen, waiting for his reassuring reply, for the logical explanation. The seconds stretched, 1 minute, 2. The hum in my ears grew louder, mingling with the thick, waiting silence of the house. His status showed typing. Then it stopped, then typing. Again, my heart clenched like a fist. His message appeared. Eleanor, don't panic. It's a standard protocol. They're covering their backs. The system is so exclusive, the sum's so large, they have to verify the source isn't being used for laundering. It's a one-time fee. It's released back with the principal once the check clears. It's just how they work. His words were meant to calm, but they did not land right. They had a rushed, technical quality. Where was my brilliant girl? Where was the gentle poet of the rig? But why wasn't this mentioned before? I typed back, a sliver of the old, cautious Eleanor forcing its way through. I've never seen this, because you were in build phase, my love. This is the extraction phase. Different rules. It's like getting gold out of a secured vault. There's a final door with a final key. The fee is the key. I had to do the same on my first large withdrawal. He'd had to do the same. The information was offered like a life raft. I grasped for it. So you've paid it? And it worked? A pause, longer this time. Yes, it took 48 hours for the review to complete after I paid, then full access. It's a formality, but a non-negotiable one. We're so close, Eleanor. We're at the very last step. The word still had power. He was in this with me. He'd face this door too. But the cold had reached my core, $989,271.61. I had nothing, not $1,000 left in checking. I had poured the well utterly dry. I had reached the summit only to find a chasm at my feet and a toll bridge across it I could not afford. Michael. I don't have it. I have nothing left to deposit. The truth of it, typed aloud, was a horror all its own. I was a woman with $19 million, and I was broke. His reply this time was immediate, the tone shifting subtly, urgently. You must find it. You must. If the fee isn't paid within 72 hours, the account flags as suspicious and enters a full regulatory lockdown. That can take months, even years, to unravel. We could lose everything to compliance hell. Think assets, the house, a quick loan against the title, anything. This is the final test, Eleanor, the last hurdle. We cannot fail now. The final test, the last hurdle. His words framed it as a challenge, a shared mission. But the cold in me was crystallizing into something harder, dread. The kingdom of numbers was showing its teeth. The serene sovereignty I'd felt just hours ago was shattered, replaced by the frantic, trapped feeling of a rat in a beautiful digital maze. The final test. I looked from the red banner on the screen to the quiet, sun-drenched room around me. The Persian rug, the shelves of porcelain, the stopped grandfather clock, all of it was just stuff, illiquid, useless. The trap hadn't just sprung. It had been there all along, and I had decorated it with my dreams and called it a throne room. The phantom's demand at 82. The silence after his last message was a physical pressure. It wasn't the old, waiting silence. It was the dead silence after a bone snaps. Find it, the house, a quick loan, the final test. His words scrolled behind my eyes, not as encouragement but as commands. The loving partner was gone, submerged beneath the urgent, impersonal tone of a project manager facing a catastrophic delay. My brilliant girl had become a problem to be solved. I sat frozen in my chair, the chill from my core leaching into my limbs. I looked at my hands, resting on the keyboard. These were the hands that had poured a lifetime of security into the void. They were empty. The house, he said the house. A low animal sound of denial caught in my throat. Not the house. The house was the last tangible proof of Robert, of our life, of the person I was before the screen's glow rewrote me. It was the final, solid ground to mortgage it now. It wouldn't be for the cottage, for our future. It would be to pay a fee, a toll to access my own plundered kingdom. I typed, my movements slow, stiff, like someone moving under deep water. Michael, alone. It would take time, days, appraisals, paperwork. You said 72 hours. His reply was a bullet. Then you don't have days, you have hours. There are private lenders, high interest, short term. For a house like yours, it's a formality. Eleanor, look at the dashboard. Look at what's waiting for you. $20 million. Is your pride in a pile of bricks worth $20 million? Is your hesitation worth our entire future? The manipulation was so naked it stole my breath. He was no longer coaxing or explaining. He was leveraging the very treasure he'd helped me build to bludgeon me into one last, desperate act, my pride, my hesitation. He was making the trap my own fault. A terrible, clarifying crack began to spread through the numbness in my mind. Can't you advance the fee? I typed a last pathetic grasp at the partnership I still, desperately, wanted to believe in from your own account. You said you'd done this before. You could pay it, and I'd refund you the second my funds cleared, with interest. Please, Michael. It was the cry of a drowning woman. The typing indicator appeared. It stayed for a full minute. When the message came, it was the final, chilling unveiling. My accounts are currently locked in the same verification cycle, Eleanor. I told you it's systemic. They're auditing all large holders. I can't touch a penny. You are on your own for this. It's your account, your responsibility. The clock is ticking. I suggest you stop looking for rescue and start looking for a solution. Do you want the money or not? Your responsibility. Do you want the money or not? Your responsibility. Do you want the money or not? The phantom had shed his last disguise. The poet of the rig, the fellow rebel, the grieving widower all vaporized. What remained was a cold, impatient voice behind a screen, demanding a final pound of flesh my body no longer possessed. The love had been the lure, the kingdom had been the cage, and the fee was the lock designed for a key I could never own. I didn't write back. I simply stared at the words. The high-frequency hum in my ears solidified into a single, deafening note of pure, comprehending horror. It wasn't just the money. It was the hymn, the yes, the future by the sea, the shared triumph. All of it had been a phantom, a cruel, algorithmically generated figment designed to study my loneliness and exploit my latent hope. I had not just been robbed, I had been erased. The Eleanor of the past was gone, liquidated. The Eleanor of the future had never existed. I was left in a hollowed-out present in a silent house staring at the ghost of a man who had never been, who was now angrily demanding I sell my soulless last shelter to pay a toll for a bridge that led to nowhere. The demand wasn't for money anymore. It was for the last shred of who I was, and he waited, a silhouette against a fake. Sunset for me to hand it over. The silence returns at 82. I did not move. I did not type. I sat before the glowing screen, the phantom's final demand seared into the air between us. The room, my beautiful sunroom, seemed to tilt on its axis. The porcelain on the shelves no longer looked like defiant beauty. They looked like 1,000 watching eyes, witnesses to my monumental, shameful folly. Hours passed. The light shifted. The sun moved across the floor, indifferent. My phone rang Sarah, probably for the Sunday call. The sound was an alien shriek in the profound quiet. I let it go to voicemail. My body was a shell of ice and lead. My mind was a single, repeating loop. $19 million, $900,000 fee. Nothing. Phantom. Nothing. As dusk bled into the room, a terrible practical thought surfaced through the shock. The website. I had to try again. There had to be a customer service line, a different button, an explanation. With hands that felt like someone else's, I logged into the Olympus Ventures dashboard. I typed the URL carefully, as I had 1,000 times. The page failed to load. A simple Stark error message in plain text on a white background. 400 for error. Page not found. The requested URL could not be located on this server. I stared, refreshed, cleared the cache, typed it again, letter by painstaking letter. 400 for error. Page not found. The kingdom had vanished, not locked, not under review, deleted as if it had never existed. A sound did leave me then. It started low in my gut, a visceral, wrenching thing that tore through the silence I had cultivated and endured for a decade. It was not a scream. It was the raw, ugly noise of total internal collapse, a guttural, airless sob that doubled me over in my chair. It was the sound of 5 million real dollars. Of Robert's life's work, of my own careful safety, of every dream of the cottage and redemption and shared mornings being sucked into a digital void. I gasped for air, the sound ragged and terrifying in the empty house. I stumbled from the chair, my legs buckling, and actually crawled on my hands and knees away from the desk, as if the laptop itself were radioactive. I ended up against the wall, under the shelf that held the chipped Spode can, the defiantly beautiful piece I had told him about. I wrapped my arms around my knees, rocking slightly. The silence rushed back in, but it was transformed. It was no longer a quiet to be filled. It was a vacuum, a sucking, howling emptiness that had consumed everything. It was louder than any noise. It was the sound of absolute zero. I thought of the messages, our years. I lunged back to the computer, a final, frantic hope. I went to the Fragile Worlds forum. I searched for Rigman Strong. User not found. His profile, his posts, our private message history, our entire courtship, every whispered dream, every shared dawn expunged. He was a ghost who had not only vanished, but had meticulously cleaned the house of any trace he was ever there. That's when the true silence descended. It wasn't just in the house, it was inside my head. The internal voice that had narrated my days, that had spun fantasies of the cottage and whispered Michael's praises, was extinguished. The fever was gone, burned out, leaving only cold, dead ash. I sat on the floor in the gathering dark. The museum around me was no longer a museum. It was a crime scene. And I was the only victim, the only witness, and the fool who had not only let the criminal in, but had given him the combination to the safe, sold the furniture to fund his scheme, and then begged him for a share of the nothing he left behind. The silence was complete. It was the silence after the explosion, when the debris has settled. And there is nothing left to make a sound. I was 82 years old. I was destitute. I was in debt. And I was, once again, alone. But this aloneness was a new, horrifying dimension. Before, I had been lonely. Now I was ruined, and the silence knew it. It pressed in, not empty, but full of mocking, echoing laughter only I could hear. The aftermath at 82, the days that followed, were not days. They were a single, stretched moment of waking paralysis. I moved through the house like a ghost haunting its own corpse. The silence was no longer an absence. It was a presence, a suffocating entity that had absorbed all the light, all the hope, all the digital hum of my false kingdom. It was the loudest thing I had ever known. The practical unraveling began with a phone call. Not from Michael, the phantom was gone, leaving only the chill of his absence, but from the credit card company. A polite, robotic voice inquiring about the unusual activity and the now delinquent payment on the $50,000 cash advance. The sound of my own voice trying to form an explanation was a dry, papery rustle. I hung up. Then came the letters, official, crisp envelopes with windows, past due notices, warnings. The words collections and liquidations swam before my eyes. My elegant, handwritten checks to the gardener, the utilities, to Marta, they began to bounce. The sound of that word, uttered by a bank teller with detached sympathy over the phone, was a slap, bounced like a child's ball, like something trivial. It was the sound of my facade shattering. David flew in. He found me in the sunroom, still in the same clothes from days before, staring not at the screen, but at the wall where the stopped clock hung. The look on his face, the horror, the pity, the dawning, gut-deep understanding was a mirror held up to my ruin. I tried to tell him. The story came out in broken pieces. Michael. The rig, the porcelain, the miracle, the kingdom, the fee, the void. His face passed from confusion to alarm to a pale, sickened rage. He took me to the police. The station was bright, noisy, a brutal assault on my silent world. The detective, a weary man with kind eyes, listened. He nodded as I spoke, his pen scratching on a pad. When I finished, he sighed, a sound of profound professional frustration. "It's called pig butchering, Mrs. Witherspoon," he said, his voice gentle. "They fatten you up with affection before the slaughter. The crypto site was a fabrication, a movie set. The numbers weren't real. The man wasn't real. It was all a script. A script, our love story, my second chance, my rebellion. A script performed by a phantom. The humiliation was so complete it felt like my skin was being scoured off. David took over. He contacted lawyers, financial advisors, a therapist who spoke to me in soft tones I couldn't absorb. The house, my beautiful, terrible museum, had to be sold. The for sale sign staked into the perfect lawn was an announcement of my shame to the world. My porcelain collection was catalogued for auction. The Shelley dainty blue, the Spode can, all of it packed away in anonymous boxes. They were not treasures anymore. They were assets to satisfy creditors. The money was all gone, not just the 5 million, the advances, the lines of credit. I was not just broke. I was fathoms in debt. The wealth that was to free me had forged chains of impossible weight, but the money, horrifyingly, was not the worst of it. The worst was the theft of my past. Michael had not just taken my future. He had poisoned my memories, every late-night conversation, every shared secret about Claire and Robert, every whispered "I love you" under the guise of auroras and starry rig skies. All of it was now a contaminated well. Had anything been true? Was any syllable of it genuine? I would never know. He had turned the most intimate vulnerability of my loneliness into a weapon, and in doing so, he made every cherished memory of connection feel like a lie. My own heart's history had been hacked and weaponized against me. I live in a small apartment now, paid for by David. It is quiet, but it is a different quiet. It is the quiet of aftermath, of rubble. The phantom is gone, but he left a haunting more profound than any ghost. He left me with the chilling knowledge that at the end of my life, I was not wise. I was a mark. I am 82 years old. I am a cautionary tale. I look at my hands and see the hands that signed away a life as security for a phantom kiss. The silence here is real, and it is mine. It is the silence of a story that is over, with a final, brutal period I never saw coming. All that remains is the echo of his question, the only real thing he ever left me with, hanging in the hollow air. Do you want the money or not? And my silent, shattered heart, knowing the answer cost me everything, still whispers, I wanted the love. I close this story not as Eleanor the character, but as a voice from the hollowed-out silence she now inhabits. This is more than a tale of financial loss. It is a map of a broken heart, drawn in real time by a professional predator. Please hear the echo of my final, costly lesson. No legitimate relationship, no matter how profound it feels, will ever begin with a request for money or an invitation to a guaranteed investment. Love does not arrive with a portfolio. It does not whisper financial secrets in the dark. It builds slowly, in person, in the full light of day. If you take anything from my story, let it be this: protect your heart by guarding your finances. The two are tragically, inextricably linked for those who prey on loneliness. Verify, then trust. Insist on video calls. Be deeply suspicious of anyone with a perfect profile but a perpetually blocked camera or a forever delayed meeting. Love should cost you nothing but your time and care. Any mention of fees, emergencies, loans, or exclusive opportunities is a five-alarm fire. Stop, block, report. If an investment sounds too good to be true, it is a lie. Real wealth is not built in weeks through secret algorithms. It is built over time with transparency. Talk to someone you trust before you send a single dollar or share a private dream. Run it by a friend, a sibling, an adult child. Let a second set of eyes see what your longing heart might be blind to. Do not let your hope become your vulnerability. Do not let your loneliness be monetized. Share this story. Share it with your parent, your aunt, your uncle, your friend who lives alone. Share it with the person you think would never fall for it, because that is exactly who I was. Let my loss be your warning. Let my silence be the alarm that keeps your world and the worlds of those you love safe from the phantoms, like this story to boost its signal. Share it to spread a shield. You might just save a heart and a life savings from shattering.